Okay, great question. What problems have I run into in the short-term rental business? Number one, you're a host and you are in the hospitality business. So your key and your goal is to have satisfied customers and have a product that they are happy with. So your goal is always to make sure it's clean. You're going above and beyond. They're getting a better experience than they would in a hotel, and that there's those personal touches, and that cleanliness is really important. The biggest thing is if you don't like cleaning, if you don't like staging or making sure there's not a speck, a hair, a bug, if you're not detail oriented, you're going to have an issue and a challenge with this. The things I ran into with a problem when I first began was I priced. So I didn't price myself properly. I was underpriced when I first began. Had a lot of bookings that were not priced high enough, so it wasn't worth my time to do it because it was so much. Because I had an entire house, 2,300 square feet. Literally takes me 24 hours to turn it around and get it back into shape for cleanliness and to the degree in which we have our high expectation and our 5-star experience. So it takes us literally 14 hours of our house cleaner doing it, and then I go in, I'll spend 2 to 4 hours doing my stuff on top of that, and that includes taking pictures before each guest so that I have proof of how I left it to them, so that I protect myself and protect them, and knowing that, like, did they do the damage, was it the previous guest, and also I have proof. So the biggest thing that I would recommend if you're getting into it would be to, for one, make sure that you have an attractive product, and once you get that all set and staged, to price yourself properly. Don't be on the lowest end. Like, go for higher than you would think, because you'll attract better guests. You will have a better experience, and also vet your people, vet your guests. So that for me, it means, like, I collect IDs. I require my guests to give me IDs, and a lot of these platforms will collect it for you, but then you don't have access to that personal information. You have to go to them and through them and have them basically agree with you if something has been damaged or broken, and you don't have that person's mailing address and their driver's license. So I always require photo ID, just like a hotel would, and that is the minimal. Like, if you're not going to be willing to give me it on my property investment, if you're not going to be willing to give me an ID, then you're not my guest. That's helped me to mitigate the parties, the people who are being irresponsible, and also people who might steal or do damage because they have some skin in the game. They know that I have their personal information and their ID, and I can actually come and track them down. Or if I needed to take further action to sue or whatever, then I would have the ability to do that because I have their personal information. I have had, when I first started out, I would take guests last minute, didn't ask for the ID, just assumed that the stuff would be covered through Airbnb, and found that, you know, in the beginning, in the newness, not realizing, like, okay, I need to make sure that I get all of this stuff handled within the 14 days to send a claim in, and not realizing that, oh my gosh, they've stolen extra things, not just the things I claimed, whether, you know, a whole entire knife set, but and trashing the place, from garbage in my plants and bringing a dog and having poop all over, things like this, where I had to get carpets cleaned. And I would definitely recommend that you get the ID. And when you're sending a claim, to take that claim and have the claim be as robust. Like, you can start a process and you can keep it going, and like, make sure that you're looking at it. So I, hadn't counted all the pillows. I found out that they stole like 6 pillows through the place, because I had extra pillows. I had a lot of extra things in my space. And so, yeah, that's one thing that I would recommend doing. And so vet your guest, make sure that you are priced properly, and take photos before each guest of everything, inside cupboards, inside cabinets, bathroom, all of it. Like, I make sure I photograph the entire house and how I left it, so that, like, any wall damages or anything that might get broken or anything, I have a picture of before they came and then after. And that's really helped me, and especially in your claim process. If you need to make a claim, you have that photo of your timestamp on your phone of when you took that photo. You have proof, so you protect yourself in that regard. And also, Another problem that I've run into is trying to make sure that you maintain staying booked. Like that can be a challenge. When I first started, we were like, oh, we had all these bookings, we were underpriced. And then COVID happened, we lost all the bookings, and then we got really good bookings, like month-long stays. And that was great. And we were doing great. And all of a sudden they changed their algorithm, and then we were getting nothing, no inquiries, nothing, like just crickets. And for like almost a year, we got like maybe one booking. So that was rough to try to figure out what's the algorithm, what's the thing. So I did a lot of research online trying to figure out, like with these different online platforms, what they're telling me, like change your pricing every day, block and then unblock days, try to keep yourself, because it's about basically automated search engine optimization. So if you're changing your prices daily, if you're having dates open and closed, then it might like help you be up higher on the search engine optimization when people go looking for places in your area. So the other thing would be to make sure that you have everything, like make sure you have a camera like at the front door. Make sure that you actually disclose it, because you can get in trouble and kicked off the platforms if you don't have that listed, and clearly put in there that you have a camera that goes and that you are recording. And of course you can't do that inside, right? Like having the digital keyless entry has been really nice when it works. When it doesn't work, it's really a pain in the butt, and it's very inconvenient and kind of stressful to like be like, oh, they're locked out. And if I'm able to open it remotely, great. If it doesn't connect remotely, then I've got to go over there. So you want to make sure, that you have the keyless entry, or the ability for them to self-check in and check out really easily. And that can be done in lots of different ways. You can just find what's most convenient. I found a place that I went to that had a lockbox, and they had a key inside of it, so that they have like a code that they can just take the key out. And I found that when I stayed at an Airbnb with a friend, there was only one key, and we're like, well, what are we gonna do? And just put it, everyone will keep the key inside of the lockbox that's hanging on the door, and we just all have that code, and we just open it with the key, put it back in. It was kind of a pain doing it that way. It's a little bit irritating, but at least the key was there, and anybody who had the code could get into the house. How I have my place is I have the Yell and August lock, and that will automatically connect to Airbnb. Sometimes you have to be careful, because if there's some kind of a weird booking, sometimes it might not connect, or they extend their booking, then you have to automatically extend their code or give it a personal code. And like VBRO doesn't work the same way, so you have to actually enter the code and send them code information. So it's a lot more front end, back end, running the actual business. So it's a lot more work doing short-term rental. It is a lot more mental load and physical load, laundry load, making sure that you're getting things done on a time frame, making sure that it's ready to host that next guest, making sure that all your amenities, from toilet paper, soap, shampoos, whatever nice little things you're going to leave, whether it's coffee, creamer. Like I like to leave all the special things. Like I'll have bananas and eggs and some creamer and butter, like for them ready to go, because I like when I'm on vacation to like start out and have a little something if I'm tired, exhausted, whatever. So we try to make a great experience for the guest. And that's why people want to come and use you. And also, so it is a lot more work than doing a long-term rental. We've done long-term rental as well. It's a lot more work, but it's also a lot more lucrative when you're booked. As long as you're booked, you're making way more money than you ever could doing long-term. And the other benefit is you get to maintain your property all along the way. You only get to go into your house, into your space, and see how things are happening when they move out. And that's always a major big deal, major cleaning, painting. Sometimes you have damage and repairs and things that you need to then like go in and do a whole regutting, and you can be out several months before you can get another renter in, because you need to get it back up to par, because it's not had that maintenance going on all the time. When you have short-term rental, you are on that maintenance all the time, because someone's renting it out and you want it to look good all the time. So your furnishings, everything is always maintained. In fact, it's always maintained better than my own home. So your yard, all of that stuff gets maintained 100% all the time. Even on our long-term, we would have a yard maintenance contract built into the long-term rental, so that like it always got done, and that it was not getting ruined or to the state that it was very difficult to recover. So you have to decide what you have capacity for, but it actually is a lot more lucrative, and you can Like I would recommend setting your minimal days. Like if you are small and you have one bedroom, one little tiny kitchenette, you have a small space, it will be a lot easier than my whole house. My whole house that's 2,700 square feet, 2,300 square feet, somewhere around there. 3 bedrooms, 2 bath. It's big, and it is a lot of labor and a lot of laundry, especially if they have 5 or more people. We have a maximum of 8 people. When I first started, I was like, oh, we can get 14 people in here. Bad idea, because then overwhelmed the plumbing. It overwhelmed a lot of it. It's just a lot harder on the place to have that many people inside of it. And the plumbing was the biggest thing that was like, if we have that many people, the plumbing can't handle it. Like it was just overwhelming, and we'd have plumbers over and stuff like that. So we had to put, hey, we have sensitive plumbing. Please don't, put things down the dishwasher drain, like rice and things that are sticky or that will get clogged in the pipes. We have sensitive plumbing. So just making sure to list and post things like no smoking, just being very clear about like, hey, this is how we recycle, putting labels on things to make sure people know, hey, here's where the first aid kit is. Here's where, just different things from, this is where garbage and recycle, and this is how you recycle and how not to. So we found that was a difficult thing too, is recycling, because we recycle in our area. And we choose to continue doing that, living on the earth that way. It's just challenging because our recycle program is don't put things in bags. And so because we put a bag in liner in our garbage, people will want to just take that whole bag and dump it in. And then it becomes like I'm sifting through garbage, or my housekeeper's sifting through garbage, or whoever's doing it is trying to sift through garbage and what's garbage and what's recyclable. So I have now, put on the garbage can itself or on the bin for the recycle, like no plastic bags. It must be clean. It must be dry. It must be just these items, like no glass, like just what is actually acceptable in the program, because otherwise we could get fined from, they find out we're doing the bags, they can actually fine us if they are like, hey, you guys are consistently doing bags in your garbage. So just getting all the details of what's working, what's not working, warning guests about certain things, or like how do I function this remote control or the door or whatever, like, and just, so it's a lot more maintenance and a lot more customer service oriented. If someone calls you late at night or they're trying to check in and they can't get in for whatever reason, you're going to have to address that. So with long-term, you like set it, you do the vetting, you get them in there, you basically forget it unless they call you and say, hey landlord, this is a problem, we need to have this fixed. So it's a lot more set, forget, but it's also, you're only going to make so much. So a lot more like risk involved, as far as like you could have a guest complain and have issues and maybe try to get money back. Some people are like that, but I have not had that many. I haven't really actually had somebody try to get money back that way. The main thing is I've had certain damages, like even on decent guests or guests who are staying for a while, I've had things like broken toilet seats, broken mirrors, things that where they might bonk, going up and downstairs, and I've got beautiful mirrors in the hall. They might knock it off and break it, or, do things like that, like damage a wall, like hit something and make a dent in the wall that I have to then get repaired. So just different things that, wear and tear, but those things continue to get resolved, over time. So makes it a lot easier to maintain your stuff at a higher level, because you are constantly looking at it, whether it's every month, every 2 weeks or whatever. So I would recommend setting your days, like your minimum days. For me, I found it was not worth it to do less than 4 days. Like it just was not worth it. The amount of time it takes me to turn it around. And with my life and my lifestyle, like with my kids and homeschooling, all that, it just does not work for me to just do a 1-day turnaround or a 2-day turnaround. It takes too much, and it's just not worth the amount of money for 1 night or 2 nights. Like if, really, so now we have our set at 7 days minimum. Like, so I was trying out, like, how about 4 days? For a while I did that, and that can be decent, but like really my ideal is like I want you in there for 7 days or a month or more, because once I have it in there, then my turnaround is a lot less, and I have to do a lot less of the physical getting in and out. So those are my ideal clients. So find out like who you want. Like, are you small? If you have a little apartment, like I said, 1 bedroom, 1 bath, or a little kitchenette or a mini kitchen, it's going to be a lot less labor to clean that, maintain it, or have someone else come in and clean it. It's going to cost you less money to clean than if you have a whole house. Like my whole house is expensive, and I have to pass that on. People don't like to do a cleaning fee, but it literally like makes a big difference. So those are things to think about. And also when you're in it, like I make sure that my beds have covers, like waterproof mattress covers, pillow covers on every single bed. They get changed and washed every single time. All of my bedding, it all gets cleaned and washed. And some places, even hotels, don't necessarily do their comforters or even have pillowcase covers. So it's a higher level experience, and not every Airbnb host does that. But if you want to do it right and do it well, prevent bed bugs and issues and things like that, like the pillow covers, the mattress covers are, like, for me, mandatory. Like, you need to have that. So I mean, there's just a lot of investment in that kind of stuff, furnishings, amenities, things like that. But once you do, I mean, you can definitely make a lot more money. It's definitely more lucrative than if you're booked, than if you are just trying to get a rental. So yeah, and obviously it depends on the area, if people are wanting to stay there. But like, if you have a smaller space, I feel like it's also easier to rent out than a big space sometimes, because some people, like traveling nurses and people like that, they're only looking for one room. They don't need an entire house. So they might not look at it like, oh, that's too big for me, and I don't need to pay that amount. I can have a smaller space. So, and it's easier to clean, it's easier to turn around, it's quicker to do because it's only one small space, and you can get quite a bit from that one small space. So it just really depends on how much time, effort, and energy you want to do to manage it. Yeah, so that's my experience in the short-term versus long-term rental. Long-term is set it and kind of forget it and just let the checks, you know, roll in. But also there's the maintenance after. And yes, there are certain things that you have with short-term where you're like, oh, I got to retouch this, or I've got to, you know, but I feel like it gets to be maintained on a much higher level than long-term. Long-term, I feel like it hasn't been deep cleaned in a long time, and that can take a while to turn it around and repaint and stuff. Whereas my house is getting a deep clean essentially every time someone checks out. So it's maintained on a really high level all the time. And so I just know it's always ready to go and ready to rent. And there's peace of mind in that. Of course, there's risk of anybody coming in there. You don't know who you're going to get. You don't know if they're really going to take care of it. But that's where the making sure you have an ID. And I don't just have the person booking it. I have the person booking it and all of the adults. All adults that come into my space, they need to have an ID, or I don't accept them. I don't give them a door code, because then I know that, for one, it's a good way to check, like, who's a registered guest. Like, are they coming in? Have they been registered? Are they having more than the 8 people we have maximum, or 5 people if it's a business group? Because, you know, if it's a mixed group family, we allow to have 8 people because they're different ages, they can share beds. But if it's like 8 grown men and they want 8 different spaces, they're not going to have the experience we want them to have. So we limit that to 5. We're like, no, 5 individual men, we can accommodate that pretty well. But after 5, we're like, no. So the only way to know if it's a registered guest is by getting those IDs and having your camera to be able to match, like, are they really bringing who they say they're going to bring, and making sure to communicate that. So it also helps you know, did they check in well? Are they having a problem? Are they stuck outside? Like, it just helps you monitor the property and get ahead of anything that might be kind of crazy. So anyway, yeah, they do recommend, like, especially in certain areas, like, if you you don't let people book for longer than 28 days, because then they can start having renter rights. So that's something to look at in your area. I find that when I'm doing business, a lot of executive and travelers, they need more than, you know, they might need 28 days or a little bit more. And if you want to just say we book 28 days, then we do another 28 days, you can solve it that way. And I've just found that some of these businesses, I know that they're traveling in business. I know that their job is going to end. They're going to leave. They're not going to just be squatters. And so that I've just, you know, it's kind of that give and take, and like feeling like, are these people, you know, like, what's their purpose? Like, I always send out a thing saying, hey, what brings you to town? Thanks for your interest in our property. What brings you to town? You know, just asking them a few questions, and recognize that we require an ID from each adult that comes. Just letting them know, like, hey, recognize that you acknowledge this before you book the property. I don't put it on automatic booking. Like, I make sure I look at every single booking, whether I accept it or deny it, because you might end up accepting a property and then having a cancellation fee or something because you're like, I'm not comfortable with that person, or, you know, that booking. So I always have, you know, a question like, hey, what brings you to town? Acknowledge we do require IDs, and then, You know, if they're not willing to do that, or if they're like, oh, I'm not comfortable, like, what are you gonna do with my ID? Is it secure? Whatever. I'm like, it's on this platform. I don't keep your personal ID and your information. It's simply, you know, it's a standard practice for hotels and everything. So if they're really not wanting, or they're giving me a hard time about it, I'm just like, I'm sorry, this is our policy. And if you're not comfortable with it, you can book somewhere else, because I'm taking a risk on you too. So anyway, that's my information that I have, that I've learned over the last 4 years of doing it, and the challenges that I've had, and some of the benefits have just been that, yeah, you can make a lot more money when it actually is booked. You can also lose a lot more money, especially if you're paying a mortgage and a rent. That would be really, really challenging, because if you do have openings in your bookings, then you can, you know, be just not making any money. But you can be doing that same thing if you have a turnaround in long term, where it's going to take you 3 months to get in there, repaint and do floors, or do any kind of upgrading that you needed to do because there was damage from the previous tenants. And so, you know, in any one of them, you might have openings in your schedule and times when you're not making money. But honestly, there are times when I've preferred to stay open and not be booked, because I find that even on those other bookings, they would carry me because I'm making more money, and I'm able to keep my house at a better level of cleanliness and repair than if I have somebody in there all the time, if that makes sense. So if I only had one booking a month, it still would be, you know, enough, or lucrative enough, almost as if it would be the amount of 1 month someone being there 24/7 and living in the place, rather than like, hey, they're working or they're on vacation and they're using the place to stay, but they're not there 100% of the time because they're doing stuff while they're in town. So lighter on the property, but they also, you can get the clinkers and have some people who just disrespect the space, or you're like, how did you break a toilet seat like in half? Like, how did you do that? Like weird things that you never would expect. Like, how did that happen? But you know, I've found that for the most part, getting it reimbursed, sometimes it's like, okay, I'm going to take this one, I'm just going to cover it, I'm not going to deal with whatever, it's not worth trying to go through the process. So sometimes you end up having a little bit more here and there, but I feel like in either one there's risk. So you just have to decide what level of risk you're willing to do and what kind of a risk you're willing to profit from, because like you might make enough in 2 months to cover the next 2 months that would be fully, sometimes you can make double the amount, you know, or more depending on your area and where you live. That if you were like, hey, I would get $2,400 a year off of this rental, you might double that. So it just depends on, but also you're going to do double the work. So recognize that, like if you're not willing to put in the time in the customer service, because they do expect you to be very like on it. Like somebody contacts you, you need to be responsive within the next like 20 minutes, like an hour. Within an hour, if you don't respond within an hour to your stuff, your SEO markings and stuff can go down. So then you won't get as many bookings, because they'll look at you as like, hey, you're not really paying attention to our guests and you're not being responsive. So, you know, you kind of have to be on call all the time. Like if it, you know, comes through and you get an inquiry or someone asking questions, like to, you know, answer their questions or to accept or deny the booking. So, you know, you kind of have to decide if you're willing to take that on. And it really isn't that many hours, but when it comes up, it's like you kind of have to stop everything, handle it, deal with it, and then move on. But it's not, you know, 24/7 constant work. But when you're on, you're on. And then when you're off, it's like, oh yay, it's a breeze. So anyway, hopefully that helps, that it gives you some information and some perspective on whether you want to begin the journey or not. I did a lot of looking at Airbnb Automated. Sean Rodrigueski, I think is how you say his last name. Anyway, Sean, he's got a big platform and space online, and he gives a lot of free education. So I watched a lot of his videos before I began on how to set up and do all this stuff. So he still does a lot of free education. He also does paid education. He also has a platform online on like Facebook and like a forum that you can join for free. And that will give you a lot of perspective on lots of people's problems and lots of people's issues, and how do you word things? How do you deal with, you know, emotional support animals and, you know, service animals and all this stuff. Like you can't deny them. Like you still have to like have them in your space and different things like that, where like, you know, dealing with discrimination and all kinds of different things of like policies and how things work. Like it's a platform where if you only read that and saw that, you would think, oh my gosh, there's so much like that can go wrong. Like there's no way I want to do this. So it can be a little disheartening, but also it's a really good place to go, oh, I never thought about that, or that's how they worded that. I'll keep that in the bank of, you know, if I ever have that come up, then that's a good way to handle it. Or, oh, geez, you know, hadn't thought about that being a scam, or, you know, things like this. So take it for a grain of salt, but recognize it's a big complaint platform too. Like people get on there and complain a lot, but it's also a great platform to say, hey, I have a question. Can you guys answer my question? I'm having this problem with this guest. Like, do you have any ideas on how to handle this? So lots of different resources that you can tap into. If you're really serious and want to get into it, I recommend looking at that as well, because that's where I looked at and really focused on really educating myself before I began. And even after, I still made mistakes, like being underpriced, not having, you know, not vetting my guests properly by saying I'm going to take IDs and requiring them to ask a few questions. And like, are they responsive? Are they going to be respectful? Are they going to answer my questions or be that kind of a guest? So anyway, hopefully that helps. Have a great day. Bye-bye.